All right, welcome back. I hope you're having an awesome time so far. Next up, our panel topic will be hyper-personalization. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage. And I'll hand it over to Matt, our moderator.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I'm so glad to be here today. As you all know, personalization and the empathy connection that go with it are now more critical than ever. So to achieve this hyper-personalization and the advantages it has, customer experience teams have, well, much ground to cover in the years to come, I believe, when the only certainties change and the only speed is faster. Companies that stand still will soon be left behind. And that's why we are here today talking about hyper-personalization in banking. So let's just start with the round of introductions. I can briefly start. My name is Matt Balcerek, and I've been working in CX teams for a good 5-6 years now. Previously working at one of the fastest growing UK startups, Monzo Bank, and currently leading customer experience at Finch. A brief intro to Finch as well. We found a way to let customers earn investment returns by automatically investing their checking balance into a portfolio designed to match their unique risk profile, which means that your entire balance is also always working for you from day one, no matter what your balance is. And we push this envelope even farther by giving customers instant access to their money when they need it, whenever they need it, even the invested part. So that's what we do at Finch. Mark, do you want to continue?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So I'm Mark Ruddock. I'm the CEO of Nula. Nula has recently come out of stealth mode. It is an app focused on small businesses. It helps small business owners keep track of the typical content that they might find useful every day in the palm of their hand. So things such as cash flow forecasting, tracking their personal and business credit files, things that might influence their ability to borrow, the ability to track social sentiment across numerous social platforms so that they have an at-a-glance view of how well their business is going. And this is part of a broader initiative at Nula to unlock both knowledge and tools and capital to power small businesses. And the reason why that's been in stealth is that Nula was born out of an initiative that started within BFS Capital, which is a firm about 18 years old that had been focused on lending to small businesses for quite a long time. And really, we've seen a pivot in the landscape of small business ownership towards a more millennial, more modern, more tech-enabled kind of ecosystem. And that's really what has driven this pivot towards an app-based approach.
Thank you. Adam?
Sure. Adam Wesley with Smart Communications. Spent the last 18 years focused in the financial services sector, supporting the market everywhere from mortgage to wealth management into retail and commercial banking. At Smart Communications, my responsibility is strategic partnerships within the financial services sector. And Smart Communications is a cloud-based software that's focused on enabling customer conversations. So connecting that data element to the digitization of those customer conversations as we move into the new evolution of how we engage with customers. So pleasure to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Adam. Dhruv?
Sure, happy to be here. Matt, thanks for inviting me. So my name is Dhruv Mehrotra. I'm a product leader at Silicon Valley Bank. For those of you who don't know, SVB is the bank of choice for the startup ecosystem. We've been around for about 36 plus years, serving primarily the commercial banking needs for the startup ecosystem. More than half the venture-backed startups in the tech and life sciences vertical bank with SVB. Was over 70% of VC bank companies that IPO'd bank with SVB. Our lines of work are primarily commercial bank, followed by private wealth. We have a small venture capital. We have a fund of funds, as well as we have a small investment bank focused on the life sciences vertical. We're about roughly around 5,000 people, growing pretty rapidly. Specifically, my role here is I'm focused on non-core banking initiatives. I do not personally come from the banking industry. I spent the last 17 years in the tech sector, working with places like Google, some startups along the way, and incubators of larger companies. And I'm now trying to bring digital innovation to one of the most innovative banks here in the ecosystem, SVB. So again, thanks for having me.
Cool, that sounds great. Can't wait to hear all your thoughts, guys, today. Well, today's bank really needs, I think, to be a customer-centric one, right? So where the core of customer relationship should be formed using those hyper-personalization features. And to succeed in creating those at scale, I think banks must really engage with the right content at the right moment in the right space as well. So the question here that I always have is if chatbots and mobile experiences, targeted emails with customers' names are the key, or is it more specific product recommendations, machine learning systems, AI that will bring us closer to the right answer? Well, that's what I've been asking myself for good last 5 months when I was designing the whole strategy for Finch. But as we all know, like the industry is volatile, right? So and so are the customers' expectations towards us as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts today on the processes you guys designed or general ideas on how to facilitate hyper-personalization within banking. And again, the point is to become supremely customer-centric, and oftentimes people consider data as the key to hyper-personalization. So let's first talk about how you are uncovering the data you need from your customers, maybe to respond and to anticipate their needs in ways that feel organic. And how are you creating a continuous learning cycle to serve contextualized and customized experiences? And that will be the first question for today. Who wants to kick us off?
I'm happy to start. So I guess we have a view on this that really drove the transformation to Nula. And that view is that the customer actually has changed fundamentally over the last few years. And that change is being brought about by a set of expectations in our particular area, which is small business financial services. Those expectations are being defined by the rest of their digital lives, not by the experiences they have, with other banks or other financial services providers. So that's a seed change, I think, in expectations that has redefined what people are looking for. And that puts a lot of pressure on us to create, engaging and compelling user experiences. So the question is, how do you do that? And I think we've taken a 3-part approach to this, Matt. So at its heart, Nula is an app that will provide a range of content and useful tools to small businesses in almost a menu-like fashion. And we let them select which of those tools they find the most compelling, given the stage of their business and the nature of their business. So the first triggering event around personalization is a user-centric self-selection, right? And we watch all of that very carefully. So when we market, we send these tools out on their own, and we see which tools are the most compelling at bringing people to the platform. And then we watch people's utilization of those tools over time, which tools retain the most attention and which do not. So the second layer of this, though, is I think even more interesting, which is the tools are really a trade for data. So when we turn on a cash flow tracking tool for a customer, really we're getting access to their bank transactional data. So we're not just looking at the tools themselves, we're now able to look at the data itself. And as we look at how that data, provides us with signals of intent and other things over time, we use that second order piece of information to sort of identify lookalikes, if you want, or opportunities to engage the customer in another tool. And let me just give you one last example before I stop. And that is, let's say that you're using cash flow tracking, credit monitoring, and other things, right? And it's pretty clear to us that you're a very stable, very solid business, but you come pretty close to the line every month when you have to make payroll or you have to make your rent or other things. That signal to us says that the conversation about a line of credit is the right conversation to have. So the tools are self-selection, the data itself are signals of intent. And that's sort of how we're beginning the journey around this. Stage 3, which is more of the AI and stuff, I don't think we have got to yet because we don't have enough data to make that work at this stage.
Great.
Drew, do you want to?
Yeah. Let me share some perspective. Thank you, Matt. That's great. Super helpful context and very relevant to how I've seen personalization happen in prior life coming to SVB. So let me share some context on what did that mean, how we're looking at personalization. So before I answer your question, Matt, let me give you some context on who we are and how we run, right? So we've taken a SVB has, as I mentioned earlier, is the bank of choice for the startup ecosystem. We have over half the venture-backed startups have been banking with us. And while I can't share the actual numbers, our NPS has been incredibly high with especially late stage startup, right? It's just that late stage startups have historically told us they really loved us. And the question is why? Why does that happen? The answer, actually, if you peel the onion further, it's always been that relationship-driven approach and that hyper-personalized approach that we've taken, which is contextualized, right? So just to give you some example, we have a relationship managing team, which is focused only on the first generation Indian entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. They hold events like Holi and Diwali, which are just specially focused on just that community. That is the level of hyper-personalization that our relationship managers and relationship-driven approach has taken. And that's why, and that should give you some context. And that's just one segment of how we run our business. There is like every niche that you can think of, we have a team that is dedicated and focused on being personalized to that kind of audience, right? And so the question is, we already have been, that's sort of how hyper-personalization is in our DNA, and that's sort of how we've approached business for the last like 36 plus years. And so as we think about like, you know, as our clients have looked for specific needs, whether that is financial needs or non-financial needs, whether that means things like finding the next CFO, or finding the tools that they need to fundraise, or any other needs that they have for their growth, we've been there to help our clients in their times of need, right? So that's the level of personalization we've approached. Now, the opportunity that we have is in marrying that already prevalent, hyper-personalized offline ways of engagement in a digital approach that is personalized in the same way to serving our clients. And so that's what we've been focused on as we have been doing our digital transformation. We've been taking things like we have a big initiative called One Data Platform, where we are sort of marrying all these data sources from various different streams, coupled with unified CRM, which is actually also taking all these different touch points and are marrying different data streams, which is helping us take a more personalized approach to how we serve our clients. We believe that future is all in future continues to be in relationships and human-to-human relationships. So we don't think the offline world way of engagement is going to disappear, but we think our future is in the omnichannel world, where you can actually marry this offline relationship-driven approach that we already have with an online presence, which increasingly has some of the similar touch points.
Cool. Adam?
Yeah, just, I mean, some really good points in there. And I think, Dhruv sort of mentioned it, that, banking started as a very personalized experience, right? I mean, banks have historically built very personalized environments for their customers. And that's really what makes, I think, the unique nature of the US market, right? Our community banking market, our sort of breadth of diversity within that market gives us really personalized experiences. And I think that's super important. I think that the leap that our banks and our credit unions and other financial institutions are having to make now is a move from a physical only world into a digital world, and to mix those two together and how they marry those efforts. And that's really, as you mentioned about data, and what I find with our customers is it's not necessarily that they don't have the data that they need, it's that they don't, one, have ubiquitous access to that data, and two, they haven't cleansed that data and categorized that data in a way to really leverage it in the right way. So that seems to be the biggest challenge in the industry. The data that's created at different touch points around the ecosystem sometimes is not easily categorized, not easily understood. It's very difficult to deal with, and therefore they have a really hard time getting to that. And then, as you mentioned, I think, Dhruv, in one point there, it's how do you centralize and get a single view of the customer, right? Because we've done digital transformation in this industry in a very siloed methodology, sort of stovepiping up our different digital transformation efforts. And what that's done is, as our customers move from one product set to another product set, we have no context of the other products and services that they use. And I think that seems to me to be the biggest challenge we're going to have in this industry, is how do we bring that together into a much more cohesive effort as we build those experiences. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's all about like creating this kind of like personal environment. So when I actually first started reading about hyper-personalization, I've learned that most banks use hyper-personalization to ensure their offers are more relevant to target audiences, right? So to create this more retail-like experience. But I think we should also use hyper-personalization to tailor what customers see and improve the conversion rates through that. So like the whole experience that they have. So in Finch, we actually started looking from the perspective on the entire customer journey in the app to recognize all the possible flows, both the happy ones, unhappy ones, and where customers might need our help or where they need us to celebrate, we are there for them. So rather than targeting more products, so upselling with kind of hyper-personalization, we chose the route of making sure their experiences within the app are multidimensional in a way. So we identified that the missing element is actually the human bond, is that's what they need to facilitate this personal environment that you mentioned, Adam, before, at least amongst our customers. And we also found that automated bots, they're the most frustrating aspect for customers in a typical contact center. So that's why at the sign up, we decided to assign you, for example, a Finch buddy who would message you right after onboarding, welcoming you to the app, to create this kind of like an inclusive community-like feeling. It's the bond between customer and us. And then once you deposit your first money, you will also receive a handwritten thank you card mailed to you by your Finch buddy, so the same person. So we also kind of like facilitate this, in a way, like relationship between us as the brand and the customer by also like introducing coffee chats with our business team, which can be scheduled for our app. We show face behind the brand. We are radically transparent in a way that we are focused on solving problems rather than selling financial products. And we think the best way to do that is by being open to customers as possible. And I think just we learn really a lot through identifying customers' action in the app and just recognizing more and more events that might trigger a question, a doubt, a need of celebration. And we try to turn that into delight after that. So it really applies to both our app and the way we deal with queries on the daily basis, including complaints. So we like source the data based on the customer's needs more than what we think could be the correct way to personalize experiences. But actually that moves me to the second question about the omnichannel strategy. So how does your personalization strategy mesh with your omnichannel strategy? Mark, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest answer for me is that we do not have an omni-channel strategy in a traditional sense, right? So there is no physical presence for Nula, and there will never be a physical presence in all likelihood for Nula. So the question is, how do we reach customers where they are? And that doesn't, there's enough nuance in the digital world for that, you know, that there is the notion of an omni-channel strategy even digitally. The way I think about this is, and I think you made a really interesting point, Matt, which is that, you know, connection, whether it's one-to-one with a human driven by a temporal event, like either a need for help proactively solved or a point of celebration proactively celebrated, is all about driving engagement at the end of the day. And I think that for us, we have to create an engagement model that is entirely digital. And we will never be able to scale where there is human to human contact in our app, right? So the challenge for us is, how do you create that illusion of community or reality of community? How do you create that moment where the customer feels they are being served what they need at the time they need it in the mode that they wish it to be served? And so for us, omni-channel means reaching them in an app. It means reaching them in Facebook Messenger. It means reaching them potentially on Alexa. So that's our definition of omni-channel, and it may be different, for example, from you know, the more traditional FIs and how they work.
Fascinating feedback, Mark, because I think we're coming from a very different position. We're trying to marry where you're at with, or where you're heading towards from where we've historically been, which has been that, to your point, traditional approach that we've taken, right? So yeah, so let me just answer that, Matt, as well. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we've taken omnichannel central to sort of how we serve our clients, right? We don't believe that there's the human to human need to connect. And of course, COVID's changed that a little bit, but in general, like to be able to break bread, meet, connect, shake hands, that's going to disappear. We don't believe that's going to change, especially the kind of clients we're serving. We're serving startup founders, CEOs of early and late stage startup ecosystem, and that relationship, that warm, fuzzy relationship that you need to have to be able to help drive business to still feel critical for business growth and our omnichannel approach. So we do think that having that physical presence is important, but the challenge and opportunity has been to marry the digital channel with this already super strong analog driven approach to how we serve our clients, right? And so, as I mentioned earlier, some of the things we're trying to do is just to start with just the data, like all the data touch points of that we have for our clients, that our RMs have, and that our clients engage with various stakeholders throughout our SVB. Start with unifying that, like unifying the data sources, unifying within a one data platform. We might be getting feeds of data about our clients from various sources. It may not just be that banking relationship that they've had. And so how do we marry all those different feeds to create this one unified view, so that when we engage, whether that is digital or an analog way, we're keeping a consistent, somewhat personalized approach in how we engage with our clients. And that's sort of how we're marrying this offline way to this online way that we're increasingly building.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with both sides, right? I mean, omnichannel to me is whatever channels you have for the customer, and as long as you're consistent across those channels, I think that you've done a good job in that, right? Some brands are some segments of the customer population are going to be very focused on digital channels, other ones in physical channels, and some in both, right? And if your customer base understands that the channels you have are primarily digital, then I think their understanding of that as part of your brand, and if they're if they're in the world of wanting some physical channels, then they're not a good fit for that use case. But I think the personalization aspect is critically important. What I've found to be interesting in the market is that there is the challenge that most of the financial institutions is they're strong in one area or strong in another area and have a hard time sort of transitioning that capability across. And really creating good consistency across it. So maybe they provide that amazing personalized experience within that digital channel, but they have no idea how to do it in a physical channel because they don't connect those two pieces together, or vice versa. It happens in the other way. And so, that again ties back to that, single view of a customer, consistency along like how you're doing digital transformation. I've just found that most customers are struggling in that specific space. So, I think what we really try to do is educate a customer on how do you create these systems of interaction that sort of span those different use cases and span those different channels and create consistency across them, right? Because if you have a great experience in one channel and then a very poor experience in another channel, it still looks like a bad customer experience, and it doesn't really matter. So you can be amazing in one area and poor in another area, and that's bad. You've got to get more consistent across the base. So.
And Matt, if I could just add one thing here, it's quite difficult to create that feeling of intimacy in a digital only channel. And I think that we've got more work to do there. But at the end of the day, engagement, which is I think key to all of this, is driven by a handful of things. One, is the conversation that you're having in one part of your relationship with the customer, similar to the conversation you're having in another part with that same customer? And is there a continuity of care and a continuity of understanding and a continuity of context? That to me is table stakes today. But you know what? The internet and the digital realm has a huge signal to noise ratio problem, right? If your customers have to do the work to find the information that they need in that moment at that point in time to solve whatever problem they have, then you're not helping them. Right. So if we as institutions can really work to increase the signal and reduce the noise, we become a very compelling place for people to stay, right? Because we give them value in a way that they don't have to go do all the work to achieve it. And I think it's a really interesting problem that we all still have to solve over the next little while.
That's right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, just expecting what customers actually want from us is definitely, well, that should be driven by data, but I think there's still so much to do in that space. What we try to do, we primarily want to add, well, as I said, this human aspect on top of the digital channels, but we also primarily based on digital channels. So what we do is trying just to increase the number of channels that we offer to our users based on their needs. We really want them to feel, as you mentioned, empowered in a way that they know where to find the information, and also giving them that freedom of being able to switch between channels and still continue even the same conversation, dealing with the same person. So what we did last year, we of course started with email supports, the most basic one. Then we expanded to Facebook Messenger, Twitter. We actually have like 2 Twitter accounts, one primary one, and the other for outages, maintenance, incident, just to make sure the customers know what's coming up. But we're also now introducing the asynchronous chat within the app. So that will be available throughout the onboarding. And then once you're logged into the app, so that will create sort of like a texting experience with us. So they don't have to stay in the app. They can just leave it and we're going to respond soon. But all of that wouldn't work really if we didn't have like very clear guidelines, I think, within our team. Like we have a very strict tone of voice document, for example, that tells how to create that empathetic, compassionate, proactive communication with users, how to identify different things, even within our platform, that might suggest maybe this customer needs help right now. So it really always starts for me at the core of this CX team. And well, just moving forward actually to the next question. So what are the most effective technologies you found in your personalization efforts so far? Because it's all about data, as we said, but I think there are technologies that help us move forward. And what are they for you?
Yeah, let me start this time around. So I'm very passionate about this because I came from the tech industry where I've worked on a number of marketplaces in my career, 9 to be specific. From like seeing homegrown solutions like what we had at Walmart Labs to evaluating tools like Dynamic Yield, Quibbit, Evergate, Blue Shift, even using Claritas Prism data. I've seen it a lot. I've seen a lot of this as it relates to personalization, right? I do have a couple of thoughts before we actually get into tools, right? So number one, personalization should not come as the cost of serendipitous discovery, right? So that is what that leads to. You know, you lead to then, if you were to go down that path, you lead to the challenge of being in an echo chamber, right? You'll start seeing only things that you want to see, and you don't see what you don't want to see, and that's something you have to be very careful of as you start to use any of these tools to drive any of your personalization, right? And the other thing which I want to sort of highlight is personalization with context is especially valuable in high cognitive load decisions. Think of a time when you have to take a big loan. There's so many things to consider, who to take it from, why to take it from. And so the more you can, to the point made earlier in this conversation, the more you can dumb it down, the more you can explain the why behind the personalization, the better your personalization strategy and outcomes will be, right? And so that's why it is so critical to be careful, like to be thoughtful about how you're going about your personalization. And so now you're coming back to your original question, like the tools and technologies, in my view, are only as good as the instrumentation and data hygiene. Also, Adam brought that up earlier. And so my suggestion is to work on the data hygiene and creating like a backbone of client profiles before really embarking on a personalization effort, right? And then subsequently, once you embark on a tool, it depends on the complexity of tech environment in your organization, right? So for example, like at Walmart Labs, our internal data lakes and tech systems were complex enough, and that no amount of these third-party tools that are out there could fit our needs holistically to serve our clients without significant rework. And so hence we continued with what we had was a homegrown solution. But this wasn't the case on other tenants at Walmart, right? Like this is just on Walmart.com. But if you look at like other tenants that we had, like Sam's Club, George, Asda, Walmart Mexico, we could use some of these homegrown solutions. And so again, coming back into the banking context, it just depends on what your internal systems is and how complex they are. So you can certainly leverage many of these offline tools, but start with your data lake and like clearly data hygiene and making a client profile right. That's where my recommendation would be.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as sort of three layers, right? I think it starts with the data at the bottom, and making sure that's, you have the right amount of data access to it. It's clean, it represents a good cross-section of what your customers are doing and what information you have about them. I think a layer up from that really starts in that single view of the customer, and whether that's a CRM system or whatever that, system of record is, providing that context around all those interactions. And then, the layer beyond that is really around interaction, right? And what I find is what's happened in the industry is we've created these disparate systems of interaction. We've created these disparate, sort of systems of record. We've disparate systems of data. And what's happening to the customer is they will move from context to context and lose that element of consistency across those different things. So as much as we want to go into this microservices world and componentize things, you still need to bring it back together at some point. So what's that connective tissue that kind of spans across the environment? And that's really where I see the advancements in the future is building those consistency layers, right? And what we try to do in our business is help the customer understand that, get the data right first, work through how you view the customer. And then when we're dealing with interaction, that should be consistent across all those different channels. And so you need to provide that one system or, systems that are tied together in such a way that they understand how you're communicating with your customers, so that you don't end up sending a customer 6 emails in one day, because one email comes off this system, one email comes off that system, one email comes off this system. And that's where we find really the huge advancements and the opportunity for these financial services.
Yeah, let me give you a few sort of perspectives from our side. The first thing we do, we sort of have this champion challenge model in a way, right? Where we force our UX team at the beginning to really think through the problem domain so that we can try to reduce unnecessary friction conceptually right from the start. And we know we're not going to get it right, and we know we're not going to get build a perfect app by imagining it in a lab, right? So we get that. But at the heart of what happens inside the app is a data model that looks at data in 2 different ways. It looks at aggregated data over time that we can do retroactive analysis on and then draw conclusions from. But it's also driven to project real-time data signals that can then trigger events in real time, right? So there's 2 different ways of looking at data. One is I need to collect everything, and I probably can't process it all the time, every day, every second of the day. And so I'm going to have these periodic processes where I go back and I understand, through machine learning and other algorithms what's happening. But I also need to have at the heart of everything that we do in the app a real-time triggering mechanism that says, when this kind of event happens, we know to trigger this sort of response. So I think it's important that we look at data in those 2 different ways. And the third thing I would say is that our data science team has a responsibility that spans the entire customer lifecycle, right? From outbound lookalike marketing and optimization of the cost of acquisition, all the way through customer lifetime value. They sit at all parts of our value chain, all of it. And we are effectively, as a business, trying to build a really great CAC to LTV machine. That's what we're doing as a business to create enterprise value, right? It's what all of our businesses do. How do we reduce the cost of acquisition and increase lifetime value? That requires continuous learning and continuous engagement about how do we find more of the customers that are ultimately more successful to us? How do we keep them engaged and retained? And how do we find opportunities to monetize them across multiple sources of monetization? So, we started Nula from day one thinking that data was going to be at the heart of everything we did, everything, right? And that we knew it was going to be a journey. But it's fascinating actually to see how far we feel we've come and how little we feel we've actually accomplished at the same time. Like, we know this is a multi-year journey, and there's so many layers of the onion to peel. We're just scratching the surface today. So it's a really interesting space, I think.
Yeah, I think also for us, it's all about like integrating the data together and finding these moments, as you mentioned. So we really put a lot of work into creating also CRM that's integrated with Zendesk, and then we also use Sunshine Conversation to facilitate the omnichannel experiences. But there are so many other tools that we use internally. I know, as Dhruv, I think, mentioned, it's kind of overwhelming sometimes that we have so many tools that send different pushes, and it may be difficult to track. But I think it's just, yeah, important to have that data stored somewhere and take advantage of what we have, since we didn't have that before, right? Years ago, probably. What we are working on right now, even to expand this kind of like a personal feeling as just another way of celebrating the first deposits, and that also coincides with the card activation, I believe. So we're doing like a personalized video from our founder as well that will like introduce the features to the app, but it's also like very personal. It uses our founder will address every customer by name, etc., things like that. But I think it's just really, again, to create this bond, and that's what we are aiming for. So the next kind of technology that we're going to use as well is to create like a social media wall within our app that will allow our customers to talk with us and between each other as well, just so we know what's in their mind and what they expect from us. So I think that will be like a huge game changer for us in terms of determining what actually our customers need. At least we hope so. But besides that, I think, well, the speed is always important. We don't want to leave customers stranded in the chat for hours waiting for a reply and not being able to close the app. That's why the chat. And then in terms of ownership, we basically identify the major challenge in like classic organizations where skills are very scattered. So we created more empowered agents. So we really took the approach of identifying like the fundamental aspects of our team that need to change to make that whole omnichannel experiences personalization work for us. And then we also leverage the data, which Mark mentioned before. But with the deep mining of data, there's always the cybersecurity issues that arise, right? And that's the next question. So how are your customers responding to that? We all know that compliance is another aspect, which is always on top of our heads. And what steps did you guys take to ensure data protection and integrity within your teams?
Maybe I can start just very quickly. So the first thing is, good design, understanding that in particular, in our case, because we collect a lot of PII and a lot of sensitive data, whether it be bank transactional data, credit bureau data, or cloud accounting data, whatever, that data is sacred to our customers. And if we breach the trust by letting that data out, we fundamentally impair our brand, right? So it starts by thinking very carefully at the beginning about your perimeter and hardening that perimeter. But it also means that you need to look internally at data leakage risk and then logging and recording of all access to sensitive data, guardrails around who can get access to that data, under what conditions, with what sign-off. So there's kind of a process element to this as well. And then I think we also have a model where we try to educate our entire team about data privacy rules, what they are, right? We put our people through courses, basically, right? What are the rules? What do they have to follow? How do they, why can't they send an email with a spreadsheet containing customer information to someone across at the other side of the office, right? Some of it starts with knowledge and understanding. And then we do the other side of it, which is we run pen tests and other kinds of probative measures to audit how successful our process is, and we just continually refine this over and over again.
Yeah, I plus one all of that actually. It's can't underestimate and overstate the need for education and processes that go with it. It starts with awareness. Humans are at the behind all of these. So at the end of the day, it starts with just awareness, and mistakes will not have. Mistakes can be significantly reduced. Unintentional mistakes can be significantly reduced just by awareness. The next layer, as Mark said, is the process that goes with it. So for example, in our case, every time we're shipping any feature within our offering, whether it's digital or especially digital process, we go through a rigorous check around which includes data privacy checks and risks assessments and so forth, where you're required, the product manager is required to talk through and understand and is grilled by this committee of people who look at it from different angles on the potential impact for data and data leaks and so forth. So that's the second part. The third part, which I would say, is you cannot underestimate the need for good architecture, which is also thinking about this from various lenses and the impact around to customer data that it can have. A fourth element, which again, plus one Mark's comment, is around design, right? You want to make sure you're setting the design right, so you're getting explicit consent from our users and not replicating that question again to annoy the user, or flip side to inadvertently triggers data leaks and so forth. So that would be the other side of this. And then of course, as with any product, we pen test and all of that every time we're launching features. So we take this very, very seriously. This is making sure that we explicitly ask for consent. We might be erring on the extreme side, but we prefer to do that rather than to actually inadvertently give out information which would not be good for our clients or our reputation. So this is a very serious issue for us, and we've got various checks and balances in our product development and engagement strategy to make sure that cybersecurity and data issues do not crop up.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mark and Dhruv did a great job of categorizing most of the areas that we spend our time in. And the backbone of the financial system is trust, right? So I mean, breaching that trust is catastrophic to any brand in this industry. It's going to be very detrimental, very difficult to recover from anything like that. So it's a paramount that you do everything in there. I think the one area that I've seen a bit more focus recently, and I think is really important, is in that training element, because let's be honest, humans are probably the weakest part of that system. And some of the social engineering stuff that has come out as of recent is getting far more sophisticated than it ever was before. And that's causing a greater risk in the system. We had an example recently where a customer had somebody take over the inbox of another individual in the organization and try and pull off a scheme where they were emailing the CEO, getting approval for an invoice, then running that invoice through finance. And I mean, it looked from all external environments as to be completely valid and totally normal. But luckily they caught it at the last minute. But it's a very fast-moving space. And of course, all the work you do in the back office to architect systems in the right way, to control access to data, to do everything that you're doing to protect it, still has got that weak element of the human focus. So I think just keeping our people as aware of what's going on in the market, making them hyper vigilant around anything that just doesn't feel right, to make sure that they notify us of those things so we can harden our controls, and also make sure that we're putting stuff in place to prevent those things from happening in the future is really where we need to focus in the months and years ahead. So.
Yeah, I think you did a great job in explaining all of that. I think it's still a great challenge for probably every company, just to be on top of all of this cybersecurity compliance, these aspects. But especially as we're bringing on board additional partners, third-party services, and all of that. But yeah, just having a good look into it and provide good training, I think that's the best start. Okay, having in mind the time, let's move on to the last question about the personalization strategy. Which for you has been the most successful in your company, and why?
The honest answer for me is I don't know yet, because we're very early days in all of this. All I will say is we have a process that is constantly iterating, and it's really evaluate, try, test, evaluate, learn, try again. So ask me this question in a few months, and I'll have a better answer.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're also very early stage right now. We just started all of those campaigns. So, in the next few months, hopefully, we'll learn a bit more about what our customers need from us and how they interpret what we do. But that's very exciting to see. Just put it out in front of our customers and find out what works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best strategy you can have, right? You've got to test, and the market keeps moving, and the client requirements keep moving, and I think just in that type of environment, having that culture, that mentality that we need to experiment and we need to play with new things. I think it's been referred to as like done not perfect. So just continually iterating off those different sample sets that you're using and examples that you're going after, and then sort of refining it as you go forward. I mean, even the best companies in the world make mistakes in this area. People refer to like companies like Amazon. I get advertisements for products I've already purchased through the platform on a daily basis. So they're not perfect at this either. So I think that's the number one message I would say to financial institutions out there is I mean, you got to get started. You're going to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. The idea is that you get better.
Yeah, I mean, to build on to all of that, our biggest success has already been the hyper-personalized approach that we've taken to engage our clients with the right message, right time, right place, right, addressing the right need, right? So as a commercial bank focused on the startup ecosystem, it's in our interest to keep our clients engaged throughout their life cycle as they're going through their own journey. So as we say in our mission, we strive to increase the probability of success for probability of our client success, right? And so, for example, our partnership with Vouch Insurance is a perfect example. Vouch is, very few startup founders know much about insurance, leave alone startup insurance. But what they do know is they're entering a different club, whether that's landing on a big client or signing up for a big office space, raising that next round of funding. All of these are trigger moments for them to get potentially insurance, right? And so by being there for our RMs, or being there for us for the startups for when they need banking or otherwise, our RMs have taken the approach of being trusted advisor, right? So often they'll tell them tools that are in their toolkit, such as Vouch Insurance, or other offers, which might be relevant to the startup's needs as they're going through that journey. And so what my key message is that we've already been taking this hyper-personalized approach for serving our clients' needs for financial and non-financial needs. And that, to me, the more you can keep doing that with the right place, right time, right message, the more you as a financial institution will be successful in engaging with your client base.
Yeah, exactly. For me, just on a final note, I think, well, for me, it's all about the trust that has to be like the core of the banking in the future. And I think customers will depend on us, on those trusted relationships that we create with them. And there will be so much more opportunity once we do that. So that will be definitely the core of hyper-personalization campaigns for me, at least. Thank you guys so much for today's session. It's great to meet you all and listen to your thoughts.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. This has been an awesome conversation, and I know the audience is giving you a huge virtual round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, and a special thank you to Matt for moderating. We really appreciate your insights. For the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and take some time to check out our amazing exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.